For centuries, humans have been growing alongside our botanical brethren. Our histories have mixed and mingled to bring us modern medical marvels, faded folklore, and everything in between. Of course, in order to understand the plant, we have to start with its roots. I'm M. Grubner-Gaddis, and this is Rooted. Alrighty. Hello and welcome back to another week of Rooted, where this week we are joined by two very special guests, Dave and Julie from Grotto. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about your show?
Yeah, so my name is Julie.
And my name is Dave.
And we are from Grotto. So Grotto is a lighthearted podcast about the paranormal, oddities, myths, legends, lore. It is about Philippine culture, just because that's primarily my culture, but then we also go into things from the Pacific Northwest, conspiracies, and other fun items that we find along the way, including our now beloved ghost cat. So.
Anything local legend wise, just anything we feel like will be fun to talk about. We love diving into and exploring.
Yes, we love Dave and Julie over here on the Rooted team. So if you like our episodes that are heavier on folklore or spirituality, this is definitely a podcast that you're going to want to add to your watch list. So with that, we're going to get into today's topic. This is, if you're really excited about the plant topics, I have really bad news for you this week, but it's my podcast and we do what I want to. So here we are. And this week we're actually going to be talking about witch bottles and frog coffins. So it's going to be a good time if you want to stick around. So Dave and Julie, what do you guys know about witch bottles and frog coffins?
So for witch bottles, I know that the reason that I'm excited about them is because archaeologists had found them in England and other places around the UK, and they're always buried around houses or trees, any place where somebody would need protection. And the contents that they found in these bottles tend to be nails, might be discarded twigs, leaves, certain things that make mainstream archaeologists believe that they're potentially witch bottles used to ward off dark magic or other witches for protection. But then fast forward to nowadays, it seems that it's more so used for promoting love and still used for protection, but it has a broader spectrum of what people use them for now.
So primarily back in the day, it was to ward off negative aspects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, it kind of relates to frog coffins, and I was super fascinated by this topic. It's not something that I knew about, and when you mentioned frog coffins, I was like, what is that?
I know.
So digging into it was a little bit of a rabbit hole, but learning about the fact...
Start over.
Well, I was really fascinated by the topic of frog coffins, and it's not something that I had known about. Maybe I'd seen pictures in paranormal websites and places like that, but it was a little bit of a rabbit hole to go down. And I was fascinated to learn that in the early 20th century, they'd found all of these frog coffins. They're just tiny little coffins with frogs in them with other kinds of artifacts like string or fabric or other objects within them, but they found them below churches. And as it turns out, it was this practice in Sweden in the 1800s, 1900s, where basically when you look at the beliefs of that area, they associated a lot of negative things that would happen with their environment, or if it was fishing and they were having not good luck with their catches or their crops, that they would associate it with witchcraft of some kind. Somebody had ill will against them and their family, and they needed to find some kind of way to revert that. So they had this belief that if they took frogs and mimicked a human burial and put them in a tiny coffin and then put an object in there that was tied to whatever it was that was impacted by witchcraft. So if it was fishing, they would put a little fishing string, or if it was their crops, they would put seeds in with it. And then they would bury it in a place that was tied with the type of religious belief that they held. So they would put them under churches because they believed that God could then help ward off this negative witchcraft. So there was that aspect. And then just in general, they could also sometimes bury it as a way to be malicious against other people. So it wasn't necessarily reflecting something, but actually going and trying to attack somebody. And then you also saw them buried in other places based on their belief system, which in Sweden they have this belief in what's called the Vaki, the V-A-K-I. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But it is basically this belief in some kind of otherworldly power, which is tied to things like river streams or woods. So you would find those coffins sometimes buried in those places as well. So I thought that was fascinating that there were different ways that they could be buried in different places, and that was important. So it was this whole really interesting academic rabbit hole that I went down learning about something, a lot of archaeological evidence. So when you're talking about that, it really reminded me of learning about frog coffins, which I now have a bunch of random knowledge about.
Well, thank you guys for kind of catching me up on where you're at with that and catching our audience up on like the kind of general things of what we're talking about. You guys did very thorough research, so thank you. And as we're moving into this, we should note that the reason I found about these things, so I've known about witch bottles for a while. I feel like inevitably when you start learning about like witchcraft, and especially like if you're also a person who's kind of into dark Victorian-esque things, you kind of can't avoid witch bottles. But I've kind of stumbled upon these being joint together because obviously with Rooted, we talk a lot about roots and digging things in the ground. So one day when I was doing research for Lightly Rooted, I just searched like weird things scientists have dug up. And both of them popped up as like, this would be a very... So I'd like you all to kind of close your eyes and imagine you're a scientist or an archaeologist and you're just kind of like digging around in the dirt. Maybe you're finding some cool rocks that are really exciting, maybe like a little piece of gold or some kind of shiny marble that makes your crow brain very happy. But as you keep digging, you kind of knock into something and you think that was a weird noise. So you keep digging. But you're being extra careful because you kind of don't want to break whatever it is. And then you unearth either a bottle filled with nails, sometimes fingernails, sometimes urine, and all kinds of other weird baubles that you're like, what on earth could that be? Or a tiny coffin. And then terrified, you pry open the lid of the tiny coffin, perhaps expecting a mouse or a bug of some kind, only to find a very small frog placed in the coffin the way you would place a person in a coffin, potentially bouquet in hand, I like to imagine. And you're left to figure out, like, why is this happening? What is that? And that's really the journey I wanted to take us on today.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the little, wonderful. Like, the crow reference, too.
Thank you. Thank you. I just think it had to be kind of delightful and terrifying at the same time for them. Like, I just imagine how I would feel if I dug up something like that, and I think I would immediately need answers. And granted, I'm kind of ignoring the fact that a lot of times people are archaeologists, often in the region they're from, so it wouldn't be unheard of for them to already know. But I like to imagine it would be someone who knows nothing.
Yeah. No, I think that's perfect, because, you know, I haven't heard of it, and Dave didn't hear about frog coffins or witch bottles. So I like the journey.
Yeah,
really
thank you. Thank you.
Really took me there.
Thank you. I'm glad you guys feel like we're all there together now. I think that's important. What is podcasting if not forcing your audience to go somewhere they didn't necessarily ask to be with you?
It's like, we're going on this journey. This is our podcast.
Yeah, this is our collective group field trip. We are Mrs. Frizzle collectively.
Yes.
On the Magic School Bus. But it just happens like PBS would not air our episodes. And
right.
I'm unclear why. I thought we were doing a great job teaching the kids the things they should know. But, you know,
did we just become best friends?
I think we did.
I think we did. Like the crow marble, the misfits. Like, there we go.
It's great. I'm telling you. But with witch bottles, that was, Julie, you actually highlighted something I wanted to talk about, which is that both of these things also could be used for good or for evil, which I think is super interesting. in the historical context. So oftentimes both of these are meant to either protect you from something or potentially like cast evil on others, or in the case of witch bottles, maybe more in like love potions and things.
Yeah.
But what I think is so interesting about witch bottles is how very specific and sometimes not at all specific they can be.
Yeah.
So there are times where in history, like we found witch bottles primarily in England. Obviously, there's a deep, rich history of witchcraft there, and also they're a place known for being like, oh no, suddenly we think witches are awful because Christianity. So they're evil.
Right.
Don't like them anymore. And also scare them away. And then I think just the concept of what scares witches is a little bit hilarious. Like the idea that if you just bury a bottle in the dirt with a bunch of nails and their hair and some stuff they don't like, they will be so repulsed that they simply won't come over is kind of endearing and hilarious. And I kind of think we should bring it back.
Yeah.
Literally. Like
it's closed. And
yeah.
One said that they put wine in it. I'm like, that's enticing.
Yeah.
I know. I was like, if I found a bottle of wine buried under a tree, I would be like, oh, they want me here. Like, I'm being personally invited to hang out.
Yeah.
Like, is there cheese? Yeah. I feel I would at least be tempted to drink it, right?
It's wine.
So,
They can't go old.
Yeah. And, like, they were doing all kinds of weird stuff. Like, they didn't just do witch bottles. They were also like, if I dry a cat or a cow and I put it in my walls, they will be so scared of me. And I'm just like, what were they doing? And also, like, should we start doing this in 2025 again? Like, should we was there something comforting there and just feeling like you could do something? Is that what it was just like, I feel so scared of witches, I need to do something. And therefore I will take these things that historically have been tied to protection, right? Like the idea with nails is they're really sturdy and very strong. They're often used in witchcraft as a kind of warding symbol of protection, especially in those cultures. So that kind of makes sense. Like I see where they're coming from in that aspect. But then we get to the extra like little DIY bits, if you will. Like I'm picturing us at a craft night and I'm like, what are you putting in your witch bottles? And we'll go over what they would do. But then I want you guys to also start picturing if you had to make a witch bottle to keep yourself away or invite yourself in, what would go in it? Like what would be in your specific witch bottle?
Yeah.
So they were like, yeah, like what would you think would go in? Because obviously for love, a lot of times we see people put in like rose petals, kind of any kind of crystal they can think of that would be attractive. Really, they're kind of a witch bottle is more or less like a vessel for your intentions. And then the ceremony is kind of just you putting in what you believe to be protective or giving you abundance, whatever you're trying to attract. And then you bury it in the ground in a kind of literal ritual, a literal ceremony. And so it is kind of still doing witchcraft. And what I think is so interesting is that witch bottles are now a very common practice in witchcraft, actually for protection. So they've kind of reclaimed that, which I think is really fun. But yes, I ask you, what would you put in your witch bottles?
Oh, I mean, if we're being literal in the sense of to attract my love, I would say probably beef jerky and chocolate.
Love.
Yes. And then maybe like some glitters to give it some pizzazz. And then like a card of some sort that you wrote a cute poem in, because you got to attract me mentally too, not just through my stomach, you know?
Love.
I would say that would be. What about you, Dave?
Food. Yeah. Taco Bell. No.
Like a gift card to Taco Bell.
Yeah.
I love that.
I like your beef jerky. That's a good one because it preserves, you know, like I said Taco Bell jokingly, but it would go bad like so fast. So I would say, I'm going to go with the beef jerky also. I would say I love board games. So board game components. Okay. Some dice would be really cool. And then some kind of like cryptic puzzle, some kind of clue, some riddle that I need to figure out that's going to lead me down a path of just enveloping my whole brain into some activity that'll probably lead me nowhere.
But it leads you to me.
Yeah, well, there we go. That's my love potion. There we go. Yeah.
I love
some cryptic code. And what does this number even mean?
Dave's
What
answer
about
is essentially just numerous witch bottles. He's like, send me on a scavenger hunt with those, please.
Yeah.
Love that.
ones
When
like
I
dropped in
think
the middle
about
of the
it,
ocean?
I love that food is like our universal answer because I'm like, if I get hungry, I become evil. So it's in everyone's best interest that I am fed. So I'm like, I would definitely need like emergency snacks in there. And in some
Yeah.
ways, it's kind of a love potion and a protective ward. Like, we're truly keeping me in that Goldilocks zone of being a good person. So definitely, I like the idea of beef jerky. I feel like that is actually so solid. And I'm kind of disappointed. Like, I wish we could go back in time and be like, hey guys, take it from us. You're going to want to put some jerky in there.
Yeah.
Like, if you really want to keep them at bay, dried meat and not in the walls of your house, you weirdos, in the witch
Right.
bottles.
I can only imagine the smell.
Right? Well, and some of the stuff they were so like the witch bottles they found in Virginia, I think are super interesting because essentially they found them around like an old like Civil War bunker. And essentially they think it was just like the war was getting so hard and so awful that people started talking about like being back in England and like what was that like, and what would they have done, like what would my ancestors have done. And the answer was like when things were really horrible and we wanted to protect ourselves, we would bury witch bottles. But it seems like a lot got lost in translation. So like a lot of the weirder stuff that they report being in witch bottles was found in like specifically those. So that's where we start running into like people peeing into the witch bottle and things. And then for some reason, historians saw the mysterious liquid and were like, let's bust that open. That'll be good. Why? Why would you do that to yourselves? That's where I'm like, I love science, but I don't think I love science enough to do that. I think I would just bank on it being something icky and be like, that's actually not my job to know. And that's a secret. That's a secret that could stay secret, I think. But I'm just like imagining like, what would it be like to get to the point where you're like, I know what's going to work. Hold on, guys. And then you suggest that, and then everybody goes with it. Like, so interesting.
Well, that was what you said during the Civil War, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, especially during times where you're in a war, times are desperate. I think, I don't have any specific examples, but I know I've heard stories of people in those types of environments and situations turning to supernatural beliefs and practices as a way to have their prayers answered or turn the tide of the war or win a battle or find food if they're hungry. So it's pretty interesting.
Definitely. And I think that also kind of segues nicely into frog coffins too, because Dave, like you touched on, frog coffins were often used in times where people were like, I don't know what else to do. I don't know where else to turn. Clearly, like we've either done something to make someone angry or we just ultimately like, we need to show that we are appreciative of this. And so we will make this kind of pseudo offering. One thing that I thought was super interesting with frog coffins was the like species and kind of frog mattered. I couldn't find the exact species of frog, but from my research, like the color of frog mattered for the kind of intention you had, which I thought
Wow, I
was
didn't know that.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Like so they were saying like, yeah, exactly like candles, which is what I was going to say. We are so, we're basically one person now. The whole, we're just combined. But yeah, so like red frogs, specifically like brownish, orangey red frogs, were typically better to use if you were trying to essentially like steal the luck from someone, right? So when Dave mentioned like you could use them for like a specific purpose in terms of kind of having maybe a little bit malicious intent, typically that malicious intent would be like, I'm envious of my neighbor who is also a fisherman and he's doing better than me. So in the dead of night, you would like go to his house and you would like steal a piece of his shirt, or you'd like find a way to snag some of his fishing line and you'd be like, haha. And then you would catch a very specific reddish orange frog. And then you would presumably have to kill it, which is so sad. But then you would give it a proper burial, which feels a little bit weird to be like, this is a respectful thing to do. Like murdering it, we're ignoring. I'm being respectful by giving it a full-on funeral, but then you would kind of like take your neighbor's stuff, bury it with your red frog somewhere near where you want your success to be. So if you're a fisherman, like you'd bury it closer to the sea, or maybe like where you park your boat at night. And then for the other ones, it seemed like they wanted primarily like brown frogs were like better for that. And I was like, this is very, I wish we could talk to someone about like why the colored frogs, but that was all I could find was that they just liked the different colors.
Yeah. Like where do they find the colors? Like just outside in the backyard?
I didn't know you could be so picky with the color of frog.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, did they just have so many frogs all over the place back then? And it was like just like finding a rock on a beach. Like you could just sit out there and be like, that's the frog, that's the one.
Like that frog looked at me funny. He's gonna get a
And then I was like, do you have to do it? Or were there people out there that were just like peddling frogs on the street? Like maybe you didn't have the time to find the red frog, but there was someone out there running like some kind of frog business where they were like, is this, are you asking for a blessing or a curse? And then they would like open their trench coat and there would just be a bunch of little tiny frogs.
It's like a psychic.
You get approached in a dark alley.
Yeah. They're like, you look like you could use some help. Opens trench coat. There are frogs. Like, I just can't imagine what do you think that it would look like in your mind, if there was some kind of frog body shop, what would it be?
I love the trench coat idea. And then I think like they would be like, oh, for 10 extra coins, I have the coffin that goes to this frog.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I was going to say, and then all of a sudden I think you can start pulling out like your little tiny frog funeral home where you have a few different models of coffin and you're like, oh, no. Like if you're trying to curse someone's bloodline, you're going to need mahogany. Okay? Yeah. Don't cheap out now. Like
you're like, and then the person's like, I'll go into their home and get their clothes for you.
Yeah, don't worry if you don't want a breaking and entering charge for the low price of 27 payments of $19.99. I'll do it.
Oh, just 27 payments? That sounds like a deal. And then
oh my gosh. Yeah, because by the time, you're like, I'll have plenty of time to come up with the rest of the money when this works, which it will. Don't be confused. I sprung for the willow bark coffin. It's gonna work.
I love that.
Now, do you know why frogs specifically? Because I found instances of other animals like bats and squirrels, but frogs are the most prominent. Do you know the symbolism behind frogs, why they would bury frogs as part of this ritual?
I couldn't find a ton. I know in some cultures out there, frogs can sometimes be tied in with fae. So I wondered if it was maybe meant to be some kind of like deal with fae. But ultimately, I fear that has been like semi-lost to history because I couldn't find anything on it either. I was like so curious about why it would be frogs. I'm not sure if it's just like they were so common and maybe they have the right kind of appendages to be like people. So maybe that's part of it. But yeah, I also didn't know. I was going to ask why you guys thought. Did you have any different theories, Dave?
Not really. I mean, I came across a really good academic article on the topic, and it basically said that understanding why frogs were used is beyond the scope of this article. But then I went searching on Google, and I couldn't find anything. Also, I couldn't find any instances outside of Sweden where this was really prominent. I'm not sure if you had heard of other places where they did this too.
Not really, just like Sweden and Finland mostly.
Finland.
So I think it is
mixed up.
Oh, you're good. I think that, and that's like kind of common for that region too, right? Like they were kind of, not many people were going out of their way to visit there because they were like, oh, it's cold, and they were kind of busy conquering everyone and then making people not like them generally. So I think it kind of makes sense that stayed a bit isolated, but I am genuinely so curious. So listeners, if you guys happen to know why they use frogs, definitely please let us know, or at least share your theories, because I think we're all very curious.
And I do love a good theory, so.
Exactly, yeah. Like, the weirder the better, honestly. Give us the best you got. You're not going to scare, I don't think, any of us.
Is that the reason frogs are related to witches? Like when you think of witches, you think of them having a big toad or a frog or something.
That is so interesting. I actually don't know the answer to that. We're going to have to look into that at some point for another crossover episode. Or actually, we can look into it right now. Let's do that. I'm seeing a lot of like frogs representing like rebirth and prosperity. There is a specific frog goddess from ancient Egypt that was said to bring forth fertility to barren lands and the emergence of millions of frogs. So you would know you like pleased her because she would send out an army of frogs, and then very suddenly the crops would take a turn.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm terrified of frogs, so.
Oh no! I think it's also partially because, like, medicinally, frogs, a lot of different frogs have different kinds of, like, poisons and secretions that could be used in, like, medicine and things at the time. And back then, like, obviously we didn't have a great grasp on pharmaceuticals. Like, we really didn't understand germs for a very long time.
Yeah.
So when we look at folk medicine, often it is just a kind of mishmash of different ingredients, some of which did work and some of which were more or less like placebo and superstition. But frogs were often employed in different kinds of folk medicine, especially even into like the Victorian era. And so I think that affinity for things also just kind of tended to stick with people, and was just like an additional association.
Huh. It's fascinating.
I've always been into like medieval and Victorian medicine in general, especially with like leashes, or when they would do like the lobotomies and use coins. Like they would ask the people to bring their own coins to. I was like, oh my gosh,
BYOC.
Yeah, and they're awake and they just have like this stick that they chew on, like bite down on.
Wow, that sounds painful.
Yeah. I was like, every time I learn about Victorian medicine, I'm like, if anyone ever tried to do anything remotely close to that, to me, like anytime or like just dentistry, anytime I'm dreading going to the dentist, I try to just remember that for a long time we thought cavities were just like literal demonic worms that had like nested in our teeth. And so people were like, we have to do an exorcism. And then they would pour hot wax in there to be like, surely this will get it to flee. And I'm like, please, like, don't, nobody touch my mouth ever again, actually. But yeah, I too love a good Victorian medicine moment.
Me too. I would run away. I would run away from the dentist.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm good.
Or also just like the humors. Oh, yeah. No way. Yeah. But I also love like the humors in Victorian medicine where they're like, you have too much blood. She has too much bile. Or like, if you don't poop enough, you're going to be really depressed. And that's what causes depression. And I'm like, they're not entirely wrong. I think it's crazy that they're like, if you have too much snot and phlegm, like you're going to be angry all the time. And then if you have too much blood, you're going to be really anxious. So a lot of times, like women, when they would be sent to the seaside, they were like, you have too much blood. You need to like be gone. You need to go to the sea and then have leeches. And something about like the seaside pressures or something too was said to like cure women's mania.
It's always women. They're just like,
they're always like, she's hysterical. Get her out of here.
Right.
I'm like, maybe she just has feelings.
Or maybe she's just right about something and you don't want to be wrong.
It's that. I think most of the time they're like, this one knows too much. She's clearly hysterical.
She needs to go to the leeches.
Yeah, literally.
Anytime I think about leeches, I always go back to, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but the Jim Carrey, series of unfortunate events. When he's at the end and the leeches come up and get him. That's always what I think about.
I had like an entire series of unfortunate events obsession when I was a child. I was also obsessed with frogs. So Julie, I can't decide if we would have been friends or no.
You can hold all the frogs for me. Like you.
There we go. Maybe it would like work out because I would be like, Julie, this is my special interest. So I'll help you, and then inevitably there will be something you like that I'm scared of, and we'll just collaborate in that way.
Like cobras. Like I just.
See, I'm terrified. See, there we go.
We have a
It's
lot of
already
weird
solved.
relationships with animals. Let me just say that.
That is fascinating. Like, how often are you like encountering cobras? Or have you?
That's my question. She has so many stories.
So in the Philippines, there's like a Philippine cobra, which is basically the same. It just, I don't know why it's called the Philippine cobra, but it still has the crown, I think it's called, the neck. And you just bop it, like you just.
It makes it sound so easy.
You just gotta be quick.
Or we're talking about when you get attacked by a shark, you're like, oh, just poke it in the eye.
No,
like,
you just gotta push it.
You just gotta push it. It's so easy. Or if I'm getting attacked by a brown bear, you just gotta fight back or lay down. Or
no. If
I'm
it's
like,
brown, lay down.
I was like, if I get approached by a bear, I'm gonna die. This is like this.
Yeah, I was
last
like,
day.
definitely don't charge a black bear or a brown bear. Black bears you can be bigger than, and that's okay.
This is common knowledge. Like,
if you've ever lived, well, you live in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know if you guys have bears out there.
Oh yeah,
you do, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
Let's hope that they never come around.
Like, you have both of them, don't you?
Yeah, we do.
For sure.
And
so when I lived in New Mexico, we just had black bears. So that one it's like, I think easier. Maybe, Dave, I'm going to say it's easier if you only have to know one. And so I think you're at a disadvantage because you're supposed to know both. And that's not really fair. Like, my brain had time to be like, you can be bigger than a black bear. You can't be bigger than the other ones.
Well, there's the little like nursery rhyme. If it's brown, lay down. If it's black, fight back. And if it's white, good night.
It's good night for all three for you.
And then I also feel like, I don't know, I went to public school in Illinois. I feel like we spent a really long time learning about things that are completely irrelevant for living in Illinois. Like, we had an entire very long section on like the colored rings on snakes and like what they mean. I'm pretty sure I got them confused because I think it's red is deadly and yellow is like not deadly, but they will bite you.
Oh, see,
I don't know. I'd be so dead.
I don't know. So you just got to stay away from them.
Really what I learned in that lesson was if it's a snake, just calmly move away.
Right.
And then if it's a salamander, immediately be overly excited.
Yes. Or and like a sun gecko, just
and then you just hang out with them. And then that's fine. But if it's an iguana, they're mean. Which is kind of sad.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
So iguanas, you could actually like, if you catch it by its back real quick, you could like pull it and then it like stops them. Like,
wait, what do you mean it stops them? So like a little wind up toy but opposite?
Yeah. So when it's all wound up, if you can get your like hand behind the back of its neck and your other hand like by its tail and just like stretch it.
Paralyze it?
It like pauses, it stops. Yeah.
This is fascinating. Julie, I feel like we need an entire episode of just like your animal wisdom. Because I'm like, next time I'm not sure how to handle an animal encounter, I'm calling you. I'm going to be like, you have to help me. I don't know what to do.
You're like,
this is everyday life for me, hearing these kinds of stories.
I mean, Dave, it sounds like you're so lucky. Like, you never have to know. You don't have to know the thing with bears. You have Julie.
Yeah.
Fine. It's fine.
I just don't leave the house without you.
I'll be like, why are you waiting? It's just a black bear.
It's good. Just punch it in the face. I'm like, what are you talking about? Punch it in the face.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I do think we need some kind of like series where Julie just shares all of her wisdom.
Yeah. Dave's like, we could do a whole series on birds alone. Dave recently found out like 5 of my bird stories, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, Lisa, how do you meet so many birds?"
Yeah, well, she said that she doesn't like birds, but then she proceeded to name like 17 different species that she does like. I'm like, I can't even name 17 species of birds, but you say that you don't like them.
Do you know the shoebill stork? Have you seen it? It's like it's so cute. Okay, I showed Dave, and he's all like, "That's not cute."
It looks like I'm gonna get jumped in the parking lot. That's what it looks like. It looks like.
Are those the really big ones that have like the really crazy like jackhammer sounding?
Yeah, look at this thing. That looks scary.
It's so cute.
I feel that way about like, what are those little owls that have like the big mouths and they open like bigger than their heads? I think they're really cute. Nobody agrees with me.
Are they the ones that aren't qualified as owls?
I think so.
Okay.
I want to say you're right. Or also, like, I don't know, baby turkey vultures have, like, a very soft spot in my heart because, like, my grandparents had this corn crypt and the turkey vultures would, like, lay their eggs up there. So every spring we would go look at them and they would just, like, peer out and hiss at us, and they're so ugly with their like downy feathers and kind of being bald. But I think they're really cute. Like if I could just give one a little kiss on the head, I would. Yes. It would rip my eyes out, but I think it'd be worth it.
It'd be worth it because it'd be soft.
What is it? This is exactly. A Ghibli movie or something. Yeah. What is this?
I love them. Aren't they so fun? I would let that like eat my head. I'd be okay.
You're gonna love this even more. It's called a tawny frog mouth. It has frog in it.
I always knew there was a reason I loved them.
Yes. Have you heard of a blue booted? Stop. Now I can't even remember what I'm saying.
The blue-footed booby?
Yes.
Yes, they're so good. Yeah. Or also, Julie, when you lived in Wisconsin, did you ever get to see the sandpipers that live up by the lakes? Because I did not, and I'm literally still bitter about it.
Oh. Why are
you
bitter
did?
about it? Yeah, they're like everywhere.
What do you mean they're everywhere?
Like, everywhere.
I feel that they were just, this is going to be like salamanders all over for me.
So, salamanders are all over Wisconsin too. But
what do you mean?
Yeah, like the black salamanders too. Like those ones are everywhere. Like just turn over any log. But
literally, none of them would ever appear for me. I have looked and looked. Julie, we're gonna have to go on a hike.
We could go on any hike. We could go looking for mushrooms. We could go looking.
That would be good. I'll find all the snacks, and then Julie, you're responsible for finding salamanders, sandpipers. Other animals that's names start with S, apparently.
And I'm just along for the ride. I don't know where this is taking me, but I'm here for it.
But the sandpipers, though, you can also see them in not the museum, in the zoo, like in Wisconsin, and you can walk next to them because they're in the bird exhibit too. But otherwise, they're all over Lake Michigan.
See, this is the problem with living in Madison, is that people are always like, why would you leave Madison? It's so great. Madison doesn't have salamanders. Madison doesn't have sandpipers. I was lied to.
Did you know there's pelicans in Wisconsin? I had no clue. Until
I did see pelicans. So that, I guess, is a benefit of Madison, is there's enough people that just start feeding birds random things that I think they gossip and then they show up. But I have seen the pelicans there. So I can vouch for that one.
Okay. That was mind-blowing to me when I saw a pelican. I was like, what?
It is a little bit wild. And also the pelicans are scarier than I thought they were going to be.
Yes. This one time.
Oh, this is a story for every species of bird.
No, we won't get into it.
No, let's get into it.
I mean, I feel we have to get into it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, there was this pelican on, what's it called? What are those logs called? They're not like a full pier. They're just like a log in the water.
Driftwood?
Driftwood? No, they like...
Oh,
like a post of some sort?
Post. Yeah.
Okay, well, I saw one. And I mean, this is a problem that I should probably work on, but I enjoy being, like, touching wildlife. Like, I like getting close enough to them and, like, becoming their friend. Like, that's enjoyable.
Oh, that is true. I've seen you do that.
Yeah, you see me chase crows all the time.
You do.
I do.
Pick up cats.
Are you also on a crow side quest to make them your friends?
Yes!
I succeeded at Girl Scouts. We succeeded at my Girl Scouts office. We're going to go over it. I'll get my friend Lori on. We'll call her up.
Yes, we need.
We were like going to my car, and there was a crow in my car,
and I was whispering.
She was like, "I'm gonna bring you home." I was like, "What is going on right now?"
Why do you make me sound like that?
That's what you sounded like.
But there's this pelican on this post, and I was like, "Oh my gosh! I just need to like touch it. I just need to go up to it and see how big it is to me." And so I was going up to it, and it kind of saw me, so I paused. I was like, "Oh, it won't. And then I've never seen like a pelican dive in water. I didn't really know that they like legitimately aqua dive. So I'm getting deeper, and I didn't realize there was like this drop off, and I almost fall. And because I like splashed to catch myself, the pelican came and it like, and so I got all wet, and I was like, "Oh, we're not friends," and I was so disappointed and sad. So I mean, it's not like a funny story. It's just more so disappointing.
It is disappointing, though. That made me feel sad.
Yeah, I was so close to it. It probably allowed me to get that close to like play mental games with me. And
I think so.
I think
like,
so.
psych.
Yeah.
That seems like something a pelican would do. Honestly, I think they're pretty much just big bullies with giant beaks.
I think so.
And just big meanies.
Yeah.
Kind of makes me think of like shrikes, those birds that will attack smaller birds and then like behead them.
Oh my gosh.
Whoa.
Like in my mind, oh, they're scary. They have those in Wisconsin. And there's also one here that lives like where my husband works, and it likes to just dive down and like grab little birds, and then it's so sad.
That's so sad.
I know. I was like, I can't imagine. Like, someone needs to call like bird OSHA, because that can't be okay.
Or PETA, maybe like PETA will go to the bird and be like, hey,
maybe someone could do something, because like they use falcons all the time to like keep starlings out of like landfills and things, which is super interesting. So I'm like, I mean, if it was doing something like that, I think it would maybe be okay. But I think, the falcons typically don't murder the birds; they just scare them. Mm-hmm. I think it would be okay if it was just scaring them, but it's being like, it's acting like Ted Bundy over there, and I'm just like, hey, that seems not cool.
Right.
Yeah.
You're like, this ain't it. Okay.
Yeah. Like, we need a different method of bird control.
I know. I don't know what it would be, though. We could capture them, and then they become our pets. And then we become one pet.
I'm just picturing us becoming, like, slowly the pigeon lady from Mary Poppins.
Okay.
Or Home Alone.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, either one.
I always told Babe that I would want a raven because, so I love Lupin. I love my cat. And, but he doesn't do anything. He's a freeloader. A raven, while I go to work, I can set it out. It'll collect shiny things and bring them back to me. And some of those shiny things may be coins, perhaps dollars. We'll actually have a job.
You can like train them for like, I like these things better. Let me give you a higher value treat. Or also you can teach them to weed. So I often am like, I need to have crows and I'll pay them a salary of foods and things, and I'll make fun little crow toys for them to play with. And then I'll just have them come to my garden and they can pull weeds, but I'll have to teach them the difference between like a weed versus a seedling. But once we figure that out, like I'm going to be we will be unstoppable as a combined force. Yes. And then also I'll train them to like, let me know when someone's coming. And then hopefully I'll be able to help them determine if I should let them come over or if they need to like attack.
Yes.
Like a guard dog, but crows.
Right. And their name
I think it could be good.
Agatha.
Oh, ooh, I like it. And then we could make like, and then I'm like, there could be fun like little crow things I build, like little toys for them, and then like a little crow hotel.
Yes.
Like their own town. A crotel! Yes! That would be so fun.
I love where this journey has gone.
Yeah, I'm really glad we got here. In a way, it's kind of related to frog coffins.
Oh, for sure.
In that they're like tiny structures you build for someone else.
Yeah. The crotel. Yeah, you build it out. Yeah, it makes sense.
I think we got there.
We did.
I can't believe I just made up a crow pun today.
I think it was great.
Yeah, you did good.
You heard it here first. Grim Grotto actually has that trademarked. Nobody take that from them. TM.
Start making it now.
Yeah, I will.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode. And we're definitely planning more crossovers in the future. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And if you don't already, make sure you follow Grim Grotto. Dave and Julie, where can everyone find you?
They can find us on podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcast. And of course, we have an Instagram too, which is Grim Grotto Podcast, where we post our little adventures. There's no crows yet, but we'll get there.
There will be.
There will be. Mark our words. There will be.
Yes.
All of their links will also be in the show notes, and they'll be added to the Garden of Guests on our website. So if for whatever reason you haven't already followed them, kind of rude, I've actually done the legwork, so you'll be able to find them pretty easily. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll be back next week with another episode for you. See you then. Until next time, be kind to yourselves, be kind to the earth, and just like a plant, drink your water. If you liked the show, please subscribe and consider leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at rooted.pod. We're finally updating regularly on YouTube at rooted.podcast. And you can check out our website, rootedpod.com, for transcripts, updates, merch, and so much more. The show is written, produced, and hosted by me. I'm Grebner Gaddis, edited by Kat Friend of Friend Diagram, and our theme music was written and produced by Eric Cluxon. Rooted is a Henbane Media LLC production.